Valley, Tom DiCamillo along with Joe Carrero. A little bit of a hiccup to start, but we are back in the swing of things. And you know what, Joe? It was a rough night. A lot of lightning and rain and thunder. And I know you live real close to a wash here.
It was flowing about 5 feet deep.
Really?
It flows very fast.
The one right next to the studio here.
The one right next to the studio. And when it does, it always washes stuff up. And the rain knocked over all kinds of stuff. So, half the morning, Marie and myself, I picked up about one or two things. But she's been picking up stuff all over the property,
Well, we are glad that CACLive is on the air and that you survived that torrent of rain that came down from, I guess it comes down from the Santan Mountains here into your property, I believe.
Thought it was coming down from the Swiss Alps, but could be wrong. I could be wrong.
All right. But we're not going to talk about the Swiss Alps today, but we're going to welcome a gentleman from far across the world who now works at CAC, Hugo Steinkamp, as the Director of Resource Development at Central Arizona College, a native of New Zealand. And he's been at CAC for multiple years. I think, 7, 8 years you've been at CAC? Is that about how long?
Yeah, since about 2004, actually.
Okay, so coming up on 8 years now. And Hugo's joining us today on CAC Live, and we're going to talk about grants. And when you initially talk about, okay, well, how interesting are grants? Well, when you get almost $6 million from the federal government in grants to help fund higher education at your institution, they're pretty darn interesting. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We do have a number up on the board. Joe has his new YouTube site up.
We do, yeah, absolutely.
So we will be taking questions throughout the show as we move along here, so please feel free to call. But Hugo, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about, first of all, before we get into the grants, how did you arrive at CAC? Because obviously I think you spent time in Boston and you lived in, I think, in the Northwest at one time.
Yeah, I was actually born in Oregon, and they all sound like this up there. But I grew up in New Zealand. I had a New Zealand mother and an American father. And but I left New Zealand in '89 to come to the States. New Zealand economy wasn't doing terribly well then, although it seems to be doing quite nicely now. And I thought, well, where the heck do I go? So I sort of threw a dart at a map of the United States, and it hit Boston. So I went to Boston, and then I was there for 8 years, and then I actually came out to Pinal County as a VISTA volunteer. VISTA is sort of the domestic equivalent of the Peace Corps program. It's volunteers and service to America, and it stems from the War of Poverty in the 60s. So you come out as a volunteer, you get I think I was getting about $500 a month as a living allowance, and you go and work for a year with an agency. I was placed at the Casa Grande Valley Economic Development Foundation with a guy called Jeff Fairman.
How long ago was this?
That was back in '97. It was sort of an interesting time to arrive in Pinal County, because at that point there was all this talk about future growth. And when I arrived in Pinal County, Casa Grande then had about 25,000 people. Today it's 50,000. And Maricopa was 3,000 people, and it's probably about 50,000 plus now. So there was all this talk of growth and how growth was going to happen, and then of course it did. So it was an interesting time to come to Pinal County, I think.
So now you fast forward, you're at Central Arizona College for the past 8 years, and your base, obviously a big part of your job is writing grants. How do you get into writing grants and in that field? How does that come about?
Well, that's interesting. After I finished my year of service, I looked around for a job, and I ended up actually with 2 jobs. My time was split between something called Pinal County School to Work, which was involved in preparing high school students and elementary students to some extent for the world of work, and I was doing marketing for that organization. And then I got a job for the rest of my time working for Coolidge Unified School District as a grant writer. And I just sort of fell into that, and I had, a certain degree of success, so I kept chugging away on it. Grant writing is sort of I wouldn't say a mystical experience, but it's sort of, I should stress that I'm looking at grants for the institution, not grants for individual students. There's different sorts of grants. So I'm looking at grants that we can launch new programs for students with, that can help retain students, that can provide extra tutoring and student services for students. So I'm working on grants for the institution that benefit students rather than scholarship types of grants for students.
How long does it take to do a grant? I mean, I think some people look at grant writing and say, okay, well, here's an application. I'm going to whip this together real quick, send it into the federal government. And in my experience with you, I mean, this process takes months.
Yeah, the writing of it is one thing, but with grants, you really need to make sure that you get buy-in from the administration and certainly buy-in from various community partners. Teamwork and collaboration is really important with grant writing, and if you're going to write a successful grant application, typically it requires partners and it requires buy-in from the institution. There's a process that you have to go through to make sure that all comes together successfully, and then if the grant gets funded, that the funded project is workable and has support from the people who were committed to the original application. So that takes a while. It's not like writing a college paper or writing even a thesis, although it can be as long as a thesis. Okay. So the writing is just one part. There's a whole lot of things you have to do before the writing to make sure it's successful.
We're visiting with Hugo Steinkamp here on CACLive. We are live on KQCK in the Santan Valley. Joe Carrero, Tom DiCamillo, and we're talking with Hugo about grants, and we're going to get into in a little bit about the type of grants grants that CAC has written and received over the years. I know we have a question from the listenership real quick, and
we already got our first interesting call from Denver, Colorado. Jeff Moss wants to know, can I hire Hugo on the side to write my new business grant? They're already trying to steal him away. See that? How funny is that?
Well, it's and part of the show today is for listeners to kind of listen to what Hugo his experience and kind of get an idea of what it takes. But aside from that, if people are looking for someone to help them write a grant like that, like this gentleman said, what should they be looking for?
Well, there's various grant writing consultants. Business grants aren't my field. However, I do know that there's very, very few grants for business. You can get loans, small business administration loans typically. Grants for business to establish a business, few and far between.
You're probably looking more at something like a small business development center to go that route to get help.
Right. And, Central CAC, for example, has a small business development center. But there's grant writing consultants. They're pretty easy to find on the web. You can hire them to write grants.
So when you go through this process of writing the grants, the very first thing you do is you have to identify a grant. And how do you go about doing that? Do people look for a grant and say, oh, here's a grant, maybe we can use it? Or do you identify a need for the institution and then go out and see if there's a grant out there to match up with it?
You really need to identify a need, because otherwise you're just writing a grant for the sake of writing a grant. So you need to establish a need, and then you find a grant that would help you address that need. So if you're just going out and looking for a grant first, that's sort of a little directionless. You really need to establish what the needs are, and then there's some other things you need to weigh. You know, for example, I look at what the odds of getting the grant are. So a good rule of thumb, for example, is if there's less than 10 awards nationwide for a grant, you might not want to apply because the odds are probably just about as good up in Vegas. So you need to be careful what you're writing and figure out what the chances are of getting funded. But there's a whole lot of other things that you need to look at too. You need to sort of be fairly holistic in your approach to weighing whether you want to write a grant or not.
Do the requests from grants come from higher administration or from professors or just staff, or can it come from anywhere in an institution?
It can come from anywhere in the institution. It also comes from the community. I mean, if you're a grant writer for a college, you need to be aware of what the community needs are. You know, our existence as a college is to serve Pinell County, so I try and keep tabs of what the community needs are in areas like workforce development, job training, after-school programming, additional post-secondary educational programming that they want. So I work closely with a wide array of community partners. One thing about Pinell County is that there's a really good human services network of non-profit agencies and government officials. So, and they're really good at coming together to work together to solve problems and to find funding to address various community and county needs.
So if a community member, I imagine CAC has partnerships where a need develops in a community and they look at Central Arizona College as a leader in the county and comes to CAC and says, we have an idea and there's a grant available for something like that. Is that how some of them work?
Yeah, that works. And, you know, we try and make sure that what's being proposed is a good fit with the college's mission and strategic plan. Every community college has a strategic plan.
So that you want to align those with the strategic plans.
Right. We want to make sure that what we're doing really supports the college and the communities we serve. So there's a process we go through to look at that. And, you know, every college and every large organization has a core, you know, set of activities or a core mission. And whatever is being proposed really needs to fit with that. So we're very careful to make sure that occurs.
When you apply for a grant and then get one, how important is it? And maybe important's not a good word, but how careful do you have to be to follow what the grant says? Like, you can't really stray off. If you say you're doing one thing, you can't stray in another direction. Is that right?
Right. With grants, you're being entrusted with somebody else's money, be it, you know, the federal government, local government, private foundations, or the state. So you need to be responsible stewards of that money, and part of that involves doing what you said you were going to do in the grant application. And each grant application has a scope of work, which is really a project blueprint for what you're going to do if you get funded. So you really need to follow that. How
detailed are those blueprints? Does it include everything from, you know, not just funding to, say you do something for students and it's going to help them, you know, that money is going to help them maybe cover some tuition cost or cover some of the supplies, but it also covers the employees, like pay. It may cover marketing if it's a grant like that. It really covers a lot of things.
Yeah, and it has to be really detailed. The way I think about it is, if I wrote the grant and died tomorrow, somebody could pick up the application that's funded and carry out an entire project without having to ask a question. So it needs to be really detailed. It's a narrative, and you don't want too many holes in the narrative because then people are not quite sure what to do. So and you also have to have a pretty powerful rationale of why you're doing the things you say you're going to do.
With grants, is the intention with grants, and maybe it varies, do some grants where you get them and the program lasts for the life of the grant and that's it, or other ones where it's almost like startup money where an institution or an entity then says, okay, we got the first 5 years, now we're going to continue it? Do they work like that?
Some grants, it's a one-shot deal. Most of the grants, particularly federal grants, they want to know how you're going to sustain the program. That, you're putting taxpayers' money into something that is going to be long-lived and a benefit to the communities you serve. So sustainability with grant projects is really important. So in a lot of ways, it really is seed money. And so for the example with Central Arizona College, we've had a number of grants that we've managed to maintain the programming after the grant ended. So, for example, we have healthcare programming, radiology program, which we funded with a $2 million grant, the bulk of which went to radiology. We purchased equipment with that. We hired a director for the radiology program with that. And that grant ended, I think, about 3 years ago, and our radiology program is chugging along and attracting a lot of students and graduating and going on to get pretty good jobs in healthcare.
Yeah, Frank Malika does a great job with that program up at the Superstition Mountain campus. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the specific grants that CAC has received this year and how those programs are having an impact on the college. You're listening to CAC Live on KQCK in the Santan Valley.
Our family pets are such a big part of our lives. That's why Kelly's Critter Clips of Queen Creek and Sun Lakes has been providing pet grooming services for over 10 years. Your dog's comfort is very important to us, so we take the time to treat your pet with care, love, and professional attention it deserves. We welcome any size and breed and feature shampoo and conditioning, styling, flea and tick dips, ear cleaning, nail trimming, and so many other services that will leave your pet looking good and smelling good and feeling great, all at an affordable price. Located in Queen Creek and Sun Lakes, call now for an appointment, 480-655-5066. Kelly's Critter Clips. When you visit Hill Family Dentistry in Santan Valley, dentist Dr. Tim Hill provides each patient with personalized, gentle care that you deserve. Our entire team is dedicated to providing you and your family with services that will make you smile. With a full range of general, cosmetic, and specialty dentistry services that will keep you and your family smiling. Our commitment to our community is to provide outstanding oral health. Hill Family Dentistry is located on 36359 Ganzel Road in Santan Valley, diagonally across from Banner Ironwood Hospital. Evening and weekend appointments available. We accept most insurances and have in-office policies available for non-insured. Contact us today at 480-588-8127. Hill Family Dentistry.
This is Mike McCord. I would like to serve as your Pinal County Supervisor, District Number 2. With zero opportunities for error, I understand the needs of one of the fastest growing communities in the United States. This is where my experience and education come into play. I hold a master's degree in business administration and have worked as an operations manager for a paramedic service, as well as currently serve as the executive director for a public charter school in Pinal County. Vote for me, Mike McCord, on August 28th, 2012.
Mike McCord leading the way. This message was paid for by the Mike McCord for County Supervisor Committee.
Are you experiencing computer problems? Is your computer running slow, bogged down with viruses and spyware? You need a reliable and knowledgeable, trustworthy computer service company. Contact Computers, Networks, and More, located in Santan Valley. Get your computer or laptop running in top condition by a certified technician with 20-plus years experience and beta tester from Microsoft. Computers, Networks, and More provides repairs and solutions to any computer-related issue, whether it's software, installation, troubleshooting, updates, or tune-ups. You can trust Computers, Networks, and More. Contact Jeff Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. to schedule an appointment. We can have you up and running quickly, usually within 48 hours. Located in Santan Valley. Computers, Networks, and More. We're here for you. Contact Jeff at 480-729-8899. That's 480-729-8899.
Life can be tough, and good people can face great challenges. My name is Mark Windsor, and I'm an experienced attorney and counselor at law. I've helped many good people work through financial struggles and regain financial stability and prosperity. It can be overwhelming dealing with creditors, the frustrations of a loan modification, struggling with the stress of a short sale. Sometimes your decisions can lead to risks down the road that you couldn't foresee without a trusted counselor on your side. At times, even bankruptcy must be carefully considered. At Windsor Law Group, we understand the stress you are under, and we provide compassionate, professional advice so you can decide the best path back to financial security and prosperity. Call us at 480-505-7044 or check us out at windsorlaw.com, WINSORLAW.com. Mention you heard us on the radio and get a discount on your initial consultation.
Welcome back to CAC Live. Tom DiCamillo along with Joe Carrera. We're live in the Santan Valley studios of KQCK, and joining us today on the program is Hugo Steinkamp, the Director of Resource Development for Central Arizona College. And Hugo's primary focus is securing grants for CAC, and he's one of the things, he does an outstanding job. You already had a job offer, or at least a side job offer from somebody in Denver earlier in this show, which is kind of funny, but Hugo, I know that especially this past year, CAC received a lot of grant dollars, and I know there's been multiple ones. Let's talk about a couple of them that you received this year from the federal government.
We received two large grants from the federal government recently, and one is a Title V Hispanic Serving Institution grant. Central Arizona College is a Hispanic serving institution, meaning that more than 25% of our enrollment is Hispanic Latino, and there's grant programs for colleges that have that. So we've got one large grant that provides a whole lot of additional services that all students can get, including additional tutoring in math and science and writing. Additional programs to help them stay in college and to graduate.
Yeah, who is this?
And another grant we got is a STEM grant, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. The United States is really trying to increase the number of students who graduate with STEM degrees, so the country can maintain its competitiveness in science and mathematics and engineering. And the federal government's been pumping a lot of money into STEM programming. So we've got a large grant for $3 million that we're going to use to really spark students' interests in science, technology, engineering, math. We've got summer camps for students that can learn about those subject areas in a sort of active way. And then when they come to college, we're putting in additional support in science and math classes so that they're more likely to pass those classes and to go into a science or math or engineering discipline.
Let's talk a little bit more about the STEM grant, because I know Diane Beecroft and Sharon Wisniewski down at CAC have been involved with the summer camp program this year, involving that. There were high school kids that came and participated. And when you look at a grant like that, like for a STEM program, and you hear that throughout education. You hear it in the media of how important that the science and the technology, and how that students need to, as a country, need to sort of brush up or improve those kind of areas. Was that just like a natural fit for CAC to go after a grant like that?
Yeah, it is a natural fit for CAC, because when you write a grant like that, you really need to take account of what's happening in the wider community. And Pinal County is in a sort of transition stage, and for example, there's a lot of solar development that's in the planning stages for Pinal County. When I wrote another grant called Community-Based Job Training Grant, we established a renewable energy degree program with that grant. One of the things we have with that through that grant is a solar technician program, so that folks can learn how to install solar systems, photovoltaic on houses primarily, and there's certain commercial applications with that. When I wrote that grant, I did some research, and at the time there was 450,000 acres in the planning stages for large commercial solar fields.
Wow. Is that throughout the United States?
That was in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
And more than half of that is in Pinal County between I-10 and Gila Bend. There's a huge solar fields going in Gila Bend.
So west of I-10?
West of I-10. These fields are like, thousands of acres essentially, and there's a lot of guys and women commuting down from places like Buckeye and Casa Grande to go and work and building these fields.
So CAC sees an opportunity. You did the research. You see these solar fields going in, and in doing that research, it makes sense to go after a grant which can train local students to come out of CAC and get jobs locally.
That's right. And our main focus was really on residential solar, because that was a large growth industry, and there's some fundamental differences between commercial solar installations and residential solar. But residential solar industry in Arizona has been a real growth industry, and it's one of the few industries, along with healthcare, that managed to add jobs during the recession. So we were thinking that it's going to be a growth area. It's going to offer jobs for students, be it in Pinal County or Tucson or Phoenix. And the solar industry in residential solar has been doing pretty well, partly because there's been a lot of state and federal incentives for installing solar on your house. So we've got some graduates, I believe, from that solar program, and they're getting jobs, which makes me happy. The other thing we looked at when we wrote that grant for renewable energy is biofuels. And Pinal County is sort of on the ground floor of biofuels development. There's a Monsanto, I believe it's Monsanto, has a experimental biofuels plant near Maricopa, and they're experimenting with algae. There was also a large biofuels plant planned for Pinal County. I think it sort of put on hold a bit because of the recession, but that was going to be 1,200 acres, and it wasn't only producing biofuels, it was distributing them through the Southwest, and I'm hopeful that will come back once the economy picks up.
Joe, I think we have a question from listeners.
Yes, Linda from Casa Grande wants to know, can you help CAC students get grants?
CAC students, we have a financial aid department, and they will help individual students with scholarship opportunities and to identify scholarships. I don't actually help students write grants. Grants for students are typically, there's scholarship grants. There is something called a Pell Grant for students, which is income-based. It's from the federal government. There's a form that you fill out for eligibility. and the CAC financial aid office can help you with that.
Yeah, and it's different when you hear the word grants. It has a kind of a wide, almost catch-all terminology, and what Hugo does is it does a lot for the institution wide in terms of programs and that kind of thing. And then you have the financial aid office that helps individual students with those kind of things, the Pell Grants, student loans, all those kind of things. So when you really look at the grants and you look at, I think you said that which one got $3 million? Was it the SOL?
That was the STEM grant,
was
$3 million. But we've also had 3 community-based job training grants from the U.S. Department of Labor, and they're about $2 million each. And we've really been focusing on growth industries in Pinal County, which is typically healthcare, because we've had all these hospitals come in. We've had the Florence Hospital recently opened. There's the Banner Hospital, I believe.
Up here in the Santan Valley area.
Right, opened up. We expanded our nursing program with that, one of those grants quite a few years ago, because there's a real shortage of nursing personnel in Pinal County. Pinal County is actually considered to be a medical personnel shortage area by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So we try and focus on creating programs where we know students are going to be able to get really good jobs.
When you have when you hear those figures of like $3 million and $2 million, I mean that's significant money and has a really major impact for communities, especially like Pinal County.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that the work we do does have an impact. I think it does. Grant writing, a lot of work goes into it, and my hope personally is that it helps students get into college, stay in college, graduate, and get decent, good-paying jobs. I think that's probably my personal reason for doing this.
It seems like that's where the reward comes in. When you get that grant and you see the effect that it has on it.
Right.
It's and you can't, I guess in your role, you can't get discouraged because you write a grant and you could not get them. You spend a lot of time doing it, but depending on what happens and how they're awarded, you may not get a grant.
Yeah, there's a lot of things outside of one's control with grant writing. So, you have to take a few knocks and keep plowing on and be persistent.
Joe, did we get a question from the listenership again?
I was going to write you a note here. Could you please do a shout out to Mary and Cindy?
Our listeners?
Right.
Mary and Cindy, thanks for listening to the show. Keep tuning in to CACLive. When you do the grant, and how detailed are the applications? I mean, and how careful do you have to be if you make when reviewers are looking at these, are they extremely critical?
Some are more critical than others, and a lot of it depends on the degree of competition, how many people are applying.
Take a federal grant.
A federal grant is, they want to know that there's a real need for the program, that you know what you're talking about. Apparently about 1/3 of all grants submitted to a federal agency are knocked out for technical reasons before they're even reviewed for the programming. So, in other words, you have to dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure you get through that technical threshold so that then they're actually reviewing the program you're writing about and decide whether to fund you. So it is pretty detailed orientated.
Do you think that when the number of applications for one grant can be so many that they are looking for the technical to kind of weed that down?
They always do that, and they'll do that anyway without whether there's 50 applications or 300. They want to know, are you eligible to apply? One of the things with the grant writing, the first thing is, are you eligible to apply? If you're a non-profit organization and it says they only fund colleges and universities, you shouldn't waste your time applying for your non-profit organization. So you have to take the eligibility criteria really carefully, seriously, and look at it.
Do you think people that do you think there are grants written at times where people don't really read the whole application and hope, well, I'll just send it in? And
yeah, and they're really, it's not a terribly productive use of their time to do that. It's a very competitive business. You have to take it really seriously. 30 years ago, when grant writing wasn't so competitive, you could probably get away with turning in something that was fairly loosey-goosey, but those days no longer exist.
Is it easier now? Well, I guess it's twofold here. Is it easier now to just submit grants because you can do them online, electronically? 30 years ago, I can remember some grants you were using a typewriter to put stuff in. Is the process been made easier?
Yeah, there's electronic submittal now, which is a lot easier. Before you had to, 10 years ago when I was doing this, you had to make 20 copies of the thing and get it to the post office and before the deadline, and postmark before the deadline, and that could be touch and go. I got sweaty palms on a few occasions trying to get the thing to the post office on time.
So now you just do it electronically, and it makes it easier. But do you think,
in most cases, yeah,
is the electronic part make it more competitive because now more people have access to?
No, I don't think it's made it more competitive. It's certainly made it easier to submit things, and the federal grants.gov program is, I've never had a problem with. It works really well. So I think it's made life a lot easier. The internet generally has made life a lot easier for grant writers because it's easier to find grants now.
We're visiting with Hugo Steinkamp, the Director of Resource Development at Central Arizona College. Tom DiCamello here, along with Joe Carrero, we are live in the Santan Valley studios of KQCK, and I want to say hello to Tim and Shelley who are listening to the program. Thank you for listening. Anybody has questions out there, we appreciate it. We get them from all over the country. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Hugo Steinkamp of Central Arizona College.
Are you ready to start taking control of your future and maximize your earning potential? Central Arizona College has smaller class sizes and personalized attention to help you compete in today's tough job market. CAC now serves Santan Valley and Queen Creek. The CAC Santan Center is located in the shops at Copper Basin on Hunt Highway, behind Barrow's Pizza. Stop in and see how taking classes at CAC costs a fraction of a state university, and your credits can transfer. So, if you want to earn real money, you need to learn real skills at Central Arizona College. Enroll in classes today by calling 480-677-7825 or visit www.centralaz.edu or call 480-677-7825 or visit www.centralaz.edu. Central Arizona College, your college, your way.
Are you planning on starting a new business? In this economy, as a new business, you know you'll need to watch every single dollar. Before you make any decisions on phone service, call Zentris Communications at 1-877-ZENTRIS. That's 1-877-936-8727.
Santan Motorsports, located in Queen Creek, specializes in off-road ATVs, dirt bikes, UTVs, side-by-sides, street bikes, and provides performance work. Santan Motorsports is your local dealership for off-road parts and accessories. They provide and pride themselves on excellent customer service and a staff that understands all aspects of the off-road business. Come in and browse our dealership and find those parts and accessories you've been looking for. Check our website, santanmotorsports.com, for monthly specials as well as used equipment. Santan Motorsports, your one-stop shop for sales, service, and knowledgeable staff. Located in Queen Creek on Power Road and Santan Boulevard, or call 480-988-0580. Santan Motorsports, we're here for you.
We're live in the Santan Valley. Tom DiCamillo, Joe Carrero. This is CAC Live every Thursday morning from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. on KQCK worldwide on the web. You can check us out on Joe's new YouTube page.
And that would be KQCK Radio on YouTube.
Nice.
And it's as easy as pulling up Tom DiCamillo on YouTube now, and he comes up all over the place.
That's great. My wife will love that.
Very famous now on YouTube.
I'm signing autographs. They're not worth anything. But.
Don't forget, you can pull up Dan Bush as well.
But we've been talking with Hugo Steinkamp, the Director of Resource Development at Central Arizona College, and Hugo was in charge of putting together the grants for CAC, and the show's been extremely informative, Hugo, because I don't think people really understand what it takes to do to put together grants and all the research that you have to do and how you go about doing this. But how do you find grants, like especially with the federal government? It must be something that changes year to year or administration to administration, depending on what the focus is. But how do you know about a grant? How do they alert the federal government? How do they alert institutions that one's coming?
Well, there's different ways of finding grants, but when you're talking about federal grants, every federal department has a website, and you can go to the federal website, and most of them have a link to the grants. In fact, all of them have a link to the grants that department offers. So, for example, you can go to the U.S. Department of Education website and look up grants, and they have a grant calendar and a grant forecast, and you click on the link and bingo, there's all the information maybe all the information you need about grants. Incidentally, for U.S. Department of Education also has a list of grants for students as opposed to grants for education. So,
is that something an institution would apply for students, or students individually would apply for?
Well, it's a mixture of both. For example, It has information about Pell Grants on the U.S. Department of Education. Pell Grants are for students, but institutions manage Pell Grant programs on behalf of students. So federal websites all have a list of grants. If you've got a business and you're interested in a grant for business, there's not a lot of them, but you might want to go and have a look at the Small Business Development Small Business Administration website to find federal grants or low interest loans, for example, for businesses. So finding grants, there's at the internet, there's federal grant websites, there's catalogs that you can buy. So finding grants isn't that particularly difficult, thanks to the internet.
When CAC receives a federal grant or any grant, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, about you lay out the grant and you have to do what you say you're going to do. Are there entities within the federal government, within private organizations, that do follow up with institutions to make sure? Is there like that check and balance? Yeah,
there's a lot of check and balances with grants, particularly with federal grants. Each federal grant program has a program officer, and you have to submit progress reports to the program officer. They want to know how the money's being spent, whether you're doing what you said you're going to do. There's also an audit process for grants, and I won't go into the details of that, but typically large federal grants, you're required to have an independent audit take place, and colleges and universities all have independent auditors who go in and check the books. So there's a lot of monitoring that goes on with grant programs. But to answer your earlier question about the funding for grants, it really ebbs and flows. A lot of it depends on the priorities of Congress and the priority of the president. So, for example, the Bush administration established the community-based job training program grant and put about $250 million a year into that program. That was in, I think, 2006, that program started. So that was an initiative of the Bush administration. What it was its aim was to really increase training in specific job skills and industries for students at community colleges. I think administrations, regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republican, view community colleges as a effective way of providing job training for people in a wide array of things, be it welding or automotive technology, healthcare. So administrations, federal administrations, Clinton, Bush, Obama have all been pretty supportive of community college funding for grants.
Are they some of the most competitive grants in the country?
Actually, probably the most competitive grants are corporate grants or private foundation grants. They're easier to write, but they're really harder to get. Federal grants are harder to write because you really have to write, 40 or 50 pages, sometimes 100 pages, double-spaced, and then there's a whole lot of attachments. But they're somewhat easier to get because there's less competition. So a good rule of thumb is federal grants, harder to write, easier to get. Corporate grants, a lot easier to write. They can maybe be 2 or 3 pages in some cases, but harder to get.
Wow, that's I guess the when you look at the corporation or the foundation type of grants that you go for, I guess there's so much. Does a lot of that money get used, or does a lot of that money go unused over the course of time? You hear that sometimes about money for students at college. That a lot of it sits on the table.
Well, what the feds will do if the money isn't used, they'll just roll it over into the next year of funding. And it really depends on the popularity of the program. There's a few federal grant programs where they don't get many applications, so the money isn't used, but that's really pretty rare these days. These days they can receive 350 applications for 10 awards, so things are pretty competitive. The money gets used up.
Talk about the CAC's been pretty successful with its TRIO program, and that's grant funded.
Yeah, TRIO is a program. They called it TRIO because there was 3 grant programs associated with it. It's more than that now. TRIO was established back in the 60s during the War on Poverty, and it's one of the oldest grant programs from the U.S. Department of Education, and it's always been funded. It really targets low-income students, first-generation students, meaning students whose parents or guardians never went to college, and students with disabilities in some cases. We have one of those grants. It's called a Student Service Grant, Student Support Services Grant, excuse me. We serve about 160 students a year. We provide services that help them with their studies, to stay in college, and to graduate. One of the big challenges for community colleges and maybe for universities is once you get students, how do you keep them from dropping out? How do you retain them? How do you get them to graduate in a reasonable amount of time? And there's a lot of grant programs that help you do that.
And retention is always a key buzzword for, for colleges, is making sure that they, the students, once they get there, that they stay. And CAC's had a lot of success with its TRIO program. How long are those programs? Is that like a 5-year grant?
Those are like a 5-year grant, and they're extremely competitive. There's the odds of getting one are pretty tough because they're extremely competitive. And but anyway, it's a 5-year program. It's about $250,000 a year. We hire an advisor and a coordinator for that. We provide something called summer bridge programming, which gives typically graduating high school students with an introduction to college, introduction to the services that can help them stay in college, to do well in their classes. We provide tutoring services through grants like student support services.
How long has CAC had the TRIO grant?
I've had it since 2004, and then we renewed it in 2010. And I believe we had one back in the 80s, but that was well before my time at CAC.
So under your what you've experienced now, this is kind of the second back-to-back TRIO grant that we've had?
Right. So it's a competitive application every time. There's usually about 950 applications.
How many do they award?
I think it's maybe about 300.
Wow.
But the organizations, the institutions that already have the grant have a slight competitive advantage because they get priority points if they've done a decent job managing the grant.
So that's where the part of the when you go in with a plan, you stick to the plan of the grant, you manage it well, and then when the feds come in and do their reviews, they're noticing that in this case CAC's doing a great job. They have the advantage coming in the next time, which is a key program. It's a multi-million-dollar grant.
Yeah, right. But with the federal government is really big on outcomes. Are you meeting the outcomes that you said you were going to meet? Are you obtaining the objectives? And it's like the corporate sector. You have targets, and you really need to meet those targets in order to keep the funding.
That's interesting about the outcomes. Is the outcomes are when you do a grant, and maybe it differs depending on the type of grant. Are the outcomes set by the people awarding the grant, or are the outcomes set by the applicant of the grant, or does it depend on what kind of grant it is?
It depends. Sometimes they will set broad parameters, and you can sort of come up with your own outcomes, which sort of relate to what the funder wants in terms of the type of programming, or else in some cases they'll set the outcomes for you and you plug in a number. So it varies, but you're talking about, with federal grants, taxpayer money, and the taxpayers want a good return on the investment, as do the government departments that have those grants. So our responsibility as somebody or an organization holding those grants is to honor that commitment.
What's been the trend of grants, especially at the federal level, over the last few years? You said you listed some of the administrations; they've all been supported. But when you look at the total number of dollars that are being allocated, is it going up, down, staying steady?
It's actually been going down in a lot of cases. Programming is being cut because of concerns about the federal deficit, and we'll see what happens. There's something called the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission, which will involve automatic trigger cuts in January 2013 unless Congress meets certain goals with deficit deduction, and that'll probably have an impact on a lot of grant funding. I think the areas that will be reasonably buoyant in terms of grant funding over the years will be job training. To be internationally competitive, America needs to really ensure that we're training people in specific job skills in specific grant industries. So, and in certain industries, there's a real shortage of skilled personnel. Healthcare is one.
And that goes back, I guess, to the outcomes, where you said that especially the federal government is big on seeing what is the outcome of the of the grant.
Right, and particularly with job training, for example, if you get a job training grant, they want to know how many people have been trained, how many people got a certificate or a degree, how many people actually got a job in the field that they were trained in, and how many people were attained employment after 6 months. So it's very closely monitored. They really want to know that you're producing graduates who can get employment, and that's a big push in the federal government.
Well, Hugo, it's the hour's flown by, and we really appreciate that you coming out and talking about grants. And at Central Arizona College, you do a tremendous job. CAC's got numerous grants this year, one of the biggest years, I guess, this past year of getting the grants, and it's all about the impact on the community and on students and the programs. And thank you so much for coming by. Hugo Steinkamp from Central Arizona College. And Joe, it's we're glad that the studio didn't float away last night in that.
True, huh?
In that, how close did it come to the building?
You know, since we have that embankment out there, it gets close to the top, but it generally doesn't go over.
Well, we're supposed to get the monsoons every day for the next few days, so we expect to be here next week. So, but Hugo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We appreciate it. Hugo Steinkamp, Joe Carrero, Tom DiCamillo. Thanks for listening to CAC Live. We'll catch you next week on KQCK Radio.
Got pain? Call Dr. Wayne. Chiropractic care may be your answer. Queen Creek Back Care. Located in Queen Creek on 20231 East Ocotillo Road on the backside of True Value Hardware Store. Safe, effective treatment with chiropractic and same-day appointments to speed your healing. With more than a decade of experience and hundreds of satisfied patients, Dr. Wayne Christensen will provide you the pain relief you've been searching for. Dr. Wayne is fully qualified to treat the entire family, even children. Call for an appointment today. 480-677-3900. That's 480-677-3900.
If your carpets are dirty, grout not so pretty, couches and love seat look like the kitty, give Riggs Services Carpet, Tile, and Stone Cleaning a call. Riggs Services Carpet, Tile, and Stone Cleaning is a local family-owned company who truly care about the service you receive. They guarantee 100% satisfaction. You deserve it. Contact Riggs Services Carpet, Tile, and Stone Cleaning at 602-492-6354.
Got termites gnawing on your house? Do you have a pest problem in or around your home or your business? At Lights Out Exterminating, we provide either the solution or preventative measure to take care of your pest problems that stem from ants, crickets, cockroaches, spiders, and scorpions. Lights Out Exterminating provides superior pest and termite control at affordable prices.